No? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but I can only see you. I can't see any screens other than you.
Okay, I will see if I can share screen.
Oops. Yeah.
Can you see the screen now?
Yes, that's fine, Lena.
Yeah,
Thank
fine.
you.
Thank you. Yes, just a question, are you online, all of the panelists now? Because there were some, I can't see Michala.
I am here.
You are here. Fine, thank you. I can hear you. So then we go on with this session. And I am Lena Levin. I'm working in VTI in Sweden as a senior researcher, and my expert knowledge is in social issues and gender especially. So, and I will introduce this session short, and then we will have 4 presentations, or actually 3, because Jonas and Michala have connected their 2 studies together, and very interesting questions about mobility in the COVID-19. All of these presentations. So first, as I said, a short introduction, and then the presentations, and then I hope we also will have some time for a discussion in the end, trying to find some connections between these studies and looking forward. What is the patterns and what is the challenges in the future? And what advantages can we take from the what we have learned in the pandemic situation, when some mobility issues changed for people and some resources also changed. The presenters here are Jonas Ihlström, he's a research assistant at VTI in Sweden in the National Road and Transport Research Institute. We have Michala Hvidt Breengaard. She's researcher, postdoc at the Department of Sociology in the University of Copenhagen. And we have Marcus Finnbom, urban and traffic planner at VSP in Sweden, and Tauro Tuvikene, senior researcher, Tallinn University. And we have Mariana Costa, analyst from VTM, Lisbon, Portugal. So we have lots of interesting these presentations here from different parts of Europe. First, I want to say something about how we look at intersectionality. TInnGO emphasizes both gender and diversity, as we have heard here before, and we adopt an intersectional approach. In this session, we will discuss the challenges of using an intersectional approach in transport research, and we would want to consider these possibilities and solutions for researchers and policymakers to adopt intersectionality. We have chosen to do this in relation to the COVID-19, since it has reminded us of effects of intersectionality on disease transmission and severity. And we also think that the mobility will have been affected in some way. Factors such as age, gender, ethnicity, education, occupation, and income are important also to understand the impacts on mobility. So we're also interested in what data do we need and how do we interpret data in an intersectional way. And an intersectional perspective can, as we see it, we can help to make visible how different power structures interact. It can contribute to the understanding of the everyday life and different individuals, and what barriers can arise for different individuals in their everyday life. within groups of women and men, and their travel behaviors, choice of transport mode, or their obstacles to access transport, and their safety. Intersectionality is context-based. I will emphasize. It's tied to location. It's also tied to time factors and culture and community issues. So it's a way to see differences and diversities in society, but also within groups. Not all women, not all men are behaving in the same way, and they don't have exactly the same needs. So an intersectional analysis doesn't mean that all power structures must be analyzed at the same time, but the purpose is to focus on the categories that are relevant to the current context. And it can be, for example, age plus gender when it comes to trying to understand girls' and boys' mobility in a particular place. It can also be ethnicity plus gender when it comes to understand who has access to a bicycle and who can cycle, as we have seen here in the presentations before. Ethnicity and gender is an important issue when you study bicycling. So I have some questions. If there are no questions from the audience, I have some questions for discussions, but I will encourage the audience and other panelists to pass questions during the presentations. I want to catch them, and we will have a short discussion in the end. So I leave the floor for the first presenter, Michala and Jonas.
Thank you. I think that Jonas will share our slides.
Jonas, you are muted.
Lena, we're still looking at your slide.
Okay, I will. But I thought I had closed them. How can I? There.
If you stop showing,
Yeah, it's just it's on the other. It's on the other.
Yeah, that's it. Okay.
Are they? No, they are still there. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I think it's working now, right?
Is it? No.
Yes, that's fine now. Yeah, we're looking at Jonas's screen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Fine. Fine.
Okay, so I will start out. As Lena already said, I am Michala Breengaard from University of Copenhagen, and I will, together with Jonas Ihlström from VTI, present two similar surveys on the use of transport during the Corona lockdown, or the Corona interventions in the Danish and Swedish context.
We can only see 2/3 of the slide. Can you go on to the next one and see? Are you doing it in presentation? We can only see up to background and motive. The rest
Yeah,
of the
that's a
slides.
problem. Now it's, yeah, we can only see half.
It's only the half. It's only the half in my computer too. Can you?
No, that's not getting better yet.
But could you, it was, no, it's, I don't know what is going on. Yeah, now we can see a little bit more. But
do you have it on two screens, Jonas? Perhaps you need to enlarge the screen, one of them.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so next slide. The background and motivation for doing these surveys was our interest in the social dimensions of the corona intervention and the pandemic when it comes to transport and green mobility. We were particularly motivated by these three aspects, which we listed here. One was that the corona interventions particularly addressed the population's use of public transport in the way that the governments recommend the population to avoid or reduce their use of public transport. However, little is known about how these recommendations impact on different social groups. And then another motivation was a call for, this call for a momentary change in travel patterns might open a window for greener mobility modes, meaning people are asked to walk or bike instead of using public transport, but we don't know if people are actually traveling greener. And then there has been a call for a green reopening of society from various climate agendas, but we don't know if people are actually willing to continue their eventual more sustainable form of transportation. Now I see this slide a little bit weird again, but maybe it's just me. Now I can, yeah, better. Okay, next slide. Next slide. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can Jonas? Can you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. We then formulated these points of interest into 3 research questions, which are to various social groups coming from gender, income, education, location, ethnicity, and so forth, differ in their use of transport during the corona interventions. Have the population, again, looking into the intersections of different categories, change their daily transport during the interventions? And are people willing to continue these eventual new forms of transport after the pandemic? And then we should say that since there's no previous research on the COVID-19 impact on transportation, our approach was very much explorative. That is, we have been open to see what our data tells us. And then next slide. The representation and study design of the 2 surveys. Jonas, will you say something about the Swedish? Are you there? I can't hear you. No.
No.
Can you say something about the Swedish? I can also say something about Danish.
No, we can't hear you, Jonas. Jonas, you are not.
We can't hear you.
Yes, we can see you are speaking. We see your mouth moving, but we can't hear you.
Okay, I will. What?
What about now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, now. Yes, now.
Very good.
Can you go?
Who is in charge of the presentation now? Is it me or is it someone else?
It's you, I think.
Okay.
It's not me, at least. Can you? Yeah, I think we should go back to the representation. Back.
Yes.
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 All right. So good. So I'm going to just say something about the Swedish survey here. We did a questionnaire reaching out to 1,004 people, and it was actually recruited through a survey company, Norstat, and the data collection was done in June. And the idea here was to get a fairly representative sample of the Swedish national population in terms of age, gender, where they live geographically, and income, ethnicity, etc. And we also do interviews in this study, and this is actually an ongoing task. And currently we have done 12 interviews, and we recruit those respondents via Facebook and Instagram and VTI's social media channels.
The Danish survey, we got almost 600 respondents that were recruited through Facebook campaign boosts, and then a range of municipalities which we have already contact to in relation to the TInnGO project and our Scandinavian hub work. And those, they were posting the survey on their websites and Facebook pages. And then we also went through like personal contacts, for example, colleagues. In the Danish case, the sample was quite skewed. It was significantly more women, significantly longer educated persons, and then especially people between 26 and 65 years old, meaning that we did not get the youngest part of the population and the oldest part. Next slide. So if we are looking into the general findings in the Danish context, we see, now Hilda is coming back. Sorry. We see a general trend of using more non-motorized transport during the pandemic. We also see that many people are willing to continue these more green travel modes, that is walking and biking. And we need to say that this does not say anything about if they will actually change their travel modes in the future, as this is also dependent on their actual opportunities. But it can be seen as a starting point for political actions on green mobility, to know that there is a certain willingness among the population. Next slide. Yes. Then we were also asking people about how they would prefer to travel if they could freely choose. And we found that people prefer to walk and bike more and use public transport less, which is probably not surprising, remembering the recommendations that we have. Next slide.
So I will say something about general findings from the Swedish survey here. So we could, as anticipated, see a significant decrease in the use of public transport during the pandemic. For example, before the pandemic, we had 28% stating that they used public transport 2 days per week or more. And during this pandemic, this figure was down to 12%. And before the pandemic, 21% said that they never used public transport. And during the pandemic, this figure was 50%. So a significant decrease in the use of public transport as anticipated. We also looked at how car and bicycle use changed, and we could actually see that there were two groups more or less. We had one group that started to use the car a lot more during the pandemic, and another group that used it quite less. So, and these more or less took one each other out. So in total, the difference was not so high, and that is primarily probably because a lot of people started working from home, etc., during the pandemic. And we could actually see the same pattern for bicycling, that some people used the bikes a lot more, while others used them less. And in total, the difference was not so significant. And we also have some other questions of more social aspects. So 63% believed that they had the opportunity to influence their choice of transport as they wished during the pandemic, whereas 37% believed that they had little or no opportunity to do so. And we also found that 18% were dependent on public transport to go to work or education. And this is on a national level. So we see that this figure is a bit higher in urban areas. 56% of the users of public transport believe that they had acceptable or good possibility to keep the distance that they wanted to other passengers, and 44% stated that they had none or not acceptable possibility to do this. We also had a question about loneliness during the pandemic, and 34% indicated that changed conditions for transport had made them more lonely. And out of this group, 35% experienced this as a major problem to them. Okay, next slide, please. So to say something about changing travel habits in a more sustainable direction, as Michala said, there have been discussions about whether this pandemic could lead to more green. Sorry, can you take the next slide, please? So whether this pandemic could lead to more sustainable travel behaviors. It's going back and forth now. Thank you. So looking at the whole data in terms of both the survey and interviews, we can say that not much suggests that there will be a shift towards a more sustainable transport future. People indicate that they want to more or less go back to traveling as they did before the pandemic, with the exception that the ones that can make fewer trips in terms the work-related trips and to go to and from work will probably do so. So we can see there's a tendency that we can have a decrease in traveling to and from work and also work-related trips, but it's not highly significant, I would say. Some questions about the public transport. There will be probably a challenge for public transport ahead. Some people, they express that they will be more careful when the society starts to open up again to use public transport, and many think that it will take time for them to return their traveling behavior on public transport as it was before. And some will actually travel less, and this could mean that that they are also less inclined to buy the monthly cards, etc., for public transport. And we also, of course, have another group that indicate that they want to go back to traveling as before when the infection disappears. Okay, next slide.
Okay. Findings on gender that is valid for both Denmark and Sweden. When we looked into the gender differences in how the interventions had impacted on people, we actually find no differences. The survey did not indicate that the corona intervention had a different impact on men's and women's transport frequency and mode. In the Danish case, we found no differences between women and men in their two most used transport modes before the corona or in their preferred future transport mode. And we found no differences in how often men and women travel to work or studies before the corona, or that travels like more or less travels to work studies during the corona interventions. And this is interesting as it differs from previous studies saying that men and women travel differently. We have heard that today too. And that women are so-called agents of change, that is, are more willing to change or to adapt into more sustainable travel habits than men are. And then there was a difference in the Swedish survey.
Yes, there was a difference there, but yes, to say something about the Swedish study, we couldn't see any difference on gender alone, so it was the same results as in Denmark, apart from one aspect, and that was during the pandemic, we saw a decrease in running errands during the pandemic for women, and this decrease was significantly higher than for men. So women run less errands now, basically, or state that they do that at least. Otherwise, no differences in terms of gender in this study. Next, please. So yeah, this whole topic is of course of intersectionality. So we wanted to do intersectional analysis on our results. And we were discussing a lot how to actually what in analysis should we do and what would be reasonable to do. And this became a rather long and complicated discussion. So we decided that we would let you in and hear something about how we could, how we discussed to do it when we, when we were supposed to do this intersectional analysis, as use an example from the Swedish survey. So next slide, please. Yes. So we thought that this dependency on public transport would be a fairly interesting thing to look further into. And we could see it from the Swedish survey that 18% or 185 persons indicated that they were dependent on public transport. So starting to looking at this group and compare it with the not dependent group, we saw that this group actually consisted of a lot of urban people living central, being quite highly educated, having quite high income when compared to the not dependent group. So we started to take the high income people out of this group and the median income group as well, to look at the low income group of this in this. And then we found that when we did that, only 51 people remained. And we also knew that this group, a low-income group, consisted of a lot of students, for instance. So when we excluded the students, which were 24%, we had only 39 left. And those 39 were 21 were men and 18 were women. And when we start looking at ethnicity and taking out the ones that had parents born in Sweden, both parents born in Sweden, we only found that 10 were left that had parents not born in Sweden, of 6 men and 4 women. So when you start doing this, you create a lot of groups, and it's quite hard to, even with quite a big sample, analysis. At least it creates a lot of problems, as you see here. You need a lot of data to actually to dig deeper into this. So next slide, please. So we concluded that this dependent group was actually not a uniform group. Thus it makes good sense to do an intersectional analysis of this dependency. But however, as public transport dependency appears to be dependent on a very big variety of variables and categories, the intersectional crossings of those variables produce a large amount of small groups, as I said. So this makes it very difficult to actually conclude something, and you need a lot of data to really say something about intersectionality here. So next slide.
Oh, there's something wrong. Next slide. I think the order is no. We need another slide. We have a sum up slide. Right?
Yeah, you have two more.
Yeah.
I saw them yesterday.
Yeah. Next one. I think
yes, there they are.
Yeah, but not that one. We take that out.
Okay. No, you have that. When you have two, there they are. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, just in order to sum up a bit on the use of an intersectional approach in our work, we might ask if the intersectional analysis is actually useful for such rather smaller quantitative surveys, even if the Swedish was actually not that small, using an explorative approach. The answer to this is both a yes and a no. On the no side is then when the field of research is this new, which it of course is because of the COVID-19, we don't know where to zoom in. And then it becomes quite difficult to conclude anything clear. That is, we get a very large amount of very small subgroups, as Jonas said. And thus we need a larger sample. But on the yes side, the survey can show something about which intersections it might be interesting to look more into. That is, we get an idea of which categories and variables are important. And we also believe that these surveys that we did are necessary. They are a necessary foundation for developing further data collection, for example, more in-depth qualitative interviews, or eventually focusing on some of the subgroups, or doing a large-scale quantitative survey. And now, thank you.
Thank you. So next presentation, we have some questions here, but I think we will save them to the end of the session. So I will return to those who have sent questions on the chat. So I will invite Marcus and Tauri to share their screen.
Thank you very much.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you.
Fine. Nice to see you.
You can hear me. Yeah.
Yes, we hear you.
Excellent. So let's try the screen sharing thing. That always causes some problems.
There is a green.
Yeah, and if I
Yeah,
now
there,
start
one.
from this side, now you don't see it, right? You see just my slide view, I'm sure.
Yes.
It's not on slide view yet. It's gone completely again.
Yeah, I just removed it because I'd rather do it this way. And I do it this way, and I'll put it on. Does it show now the slide view?
No.
The full screen view. Okay, I know the
We've
I know
had
the
trouble
problem.
with this all day.
Yeah, that's the problem with if you have multiple screens, I guess. And I will just change it to one screen.
I had the
only.
same problem from the beginning, but I managed by tick the usual way on the screen.
Now you're seeing
view,
my
the view.
now you're seeing my. Sorry, I'm just doing stop share, and I will just add it again. Sorry about that. I think it should work now.
Oh, yes.
But you are, I'm watching away from you because my camera is on the other side. Anyway.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here, and also, I mean, thanks for organizing the event, but also thanks to Marcus, who actually invited me as well. Marcus was the first contact for you, so I can say a few words of who am I and what is this thing, and then from the midway through, Marcus will continue. Is it okay, Marcus, or you want to say some words about yourself at the start?
Okay, yeah, well, I can do that. So my name is Marcus Wienboom. I work as an urban and traffic planner at WSP, and I'm also a research fellow at Tallinn University during this year.
Yeah, so yeah, my name is Tauri, and I'm working at Tallinn University, and I'm the project leader for this project, the public transport as public space in European cities. It is funded by HERA, which is Humanities in European Research Area. And there are 4 different institutions involved here. As a background, what is also important to note is that the COVID survey is and interviews is something that we didn't intend to do at the very beginning, but it was something that we realized we are unable to do some of other research activities, which are more ethnographic and anthropological. So we considered it's impossible to really go to public transport ourselves, or it would not be recommended. So we decided to change the approach a little bit. So what we did is basically a survey, a web-based survey. So there are some similarities with what we heard before. Plus, we also did some interviews. As our project consists of different countries, groups in different countries, as well as different language skills. So we designed the survey in 7 different languages, and we focused mainly on specific countries. So it's not European-wide, but it has respondents from different countries and in different languages. But mainly it is Estonia, it is Sweden, it is Germany, it is Belgium. And so we did also about 49 interviews, which we focused on cities. So we have 10 in Tallinn and a bit more in Brussels, about 10 in Stockholm, and in 3 different German cities. So the qualitative approach is actually very, very important. It is also important to say here it's quite preliminary at the moment. We are still analyzing the results and wrapping it up, so it takes a bit of time. So everything we talk here is we should hide a note there. So be careful, but it's a starting point for discussion. And the key questions for us were actually about the feelings and emotions as well as practices. So we were interested in how the uses, experiences, and understandings of public transport may have changed actually following the outbreak of COVID-19. So the survey also consisted some open questions, and the interviews were quite a lot discussing about atmosphere as well, and as well as all sorts of tiny practices of using public transport. This is our research team in that project as well. So it's not only us two here. There's a great involvement from the other people mentioned in the slide here. So should thank them as well. Right. And to start with some of the insights from the interviews, it's important to say that, of course, there is the realization that public transport is a vector of disease. And this is something that runs through the interviews. And the first quote is quite vivid in that sense, how the person explains realizing that you can get infected by anything, and that I hadn't really thought about this before. So this kind of realization, how you come to public transport, and it could be something where you meet a lot of strangers, and these strangers could actually infect you. And this was something, as that person also notes, she didn't look into before. She didn't pay attention to that. The second quote refers to the example of coughing, which is something that you perhaps have also encountered yourself, but the coughing is something that has become particularly intense. And the person notes how the passengers feel uncomfortable when others cough, and also note her own practice of stepping out of public transport to actually, cough outside and then come back. So this kind of little practices and the changes have been quite significant. But that's not the all of the story here. Because in many ways, despite this kind of being afraid of public transport, if you look at what kind of words people associate with the atmosphere of public transport, you get much more neutral as well as slightly positive associations. And what really became the key word is distance, which is a feeling and a practice at the same time. But equally, you could see words such as calm or quiet being mentioned here. Of course, they're also tense and cautious and suspicious, but you see actually some other words which are more neutral and positive as well. And you can see in interviews a lot of narratives how it became much more pleasant to use public transport because it became emptier, for instance. It became slightly more comfortable. Anyway, I will now give word to Markus to talk a little bit about how public transport compares to other spaces, which was one of the questions. Would you continue?
Next slide, please.
Okay, yeah.
So this graph shows you a comparison between public transport compared to supermarkets. Sorry, and it shows that there is a very strong correlation between people that have not used public transport. That is the darker staples in the graph. They perceive public transport as something less safe than supermarkets. So we see a very strong correlation between these factors. There was no correlation in relating to age, nor gender, nor income either. So it was very much a sort of a subjective experience for those who stopped using the public transport. And we think the comparison with supermarkets is really interesting because it's also a very crowded space with lots of touching, but it has not been as stigmatized as public transport in the public debate. One could argue also that people that stopped using public transport are thinking of it as they used to be, with much more crowding in rush hour, etc. And so they compare the supermarkets with another picture that does no longer exist, etc. But it raises the issue of who stopped using it and who could start working from home, or could avoid public transport and start using a car, etc. So it raises questions related to class and transport equity and accessibility to different types of transports as well. Next slide, please. And these are two quotes that relates to that people are concerned with more than just COVID-19, and this became super clear in the interviews. There are other things to worry about as well. This first interview stresses how I feel more self-conscious about my personal safety, about the risk of being mugged because there were so few people around. So the pandemic and the different lockdowns had these effects that people felt. She appreciated the lesser risk of contracting COVID-19, as it says in the quote, but it enhanced other worries and fears when using public transport. There was this second quote from Tallinn, is about how she now appreciates that she always gets to sit down because there's no risk of falling, because due to rapid braking. when buses are driving too fast and braking way too rapidly, etc. And so she appreciated this aspect much more because she used to be worried about falling when riding the bus. Next slide, please. So one group that clearly talked about fear, though, was bus drivers that was interviewed in Stockholm, Sweden. And yeah, let's just read the whole quote. In the initial stage, we were terrified, we who drove the buses. People were pouring in. We wanted the front doors closed, but the bus companies said no, since SL, the transit authority, said no. Then we closed them off ourselves. No one could use the front. At that point, before we were allowed to close the doors, there were 10 bus drivers seriously ill at my bus garage. And then guards were sent out to tear down the tape and paper that closed off the front and force bus drivers to open the front door. And to put this in a sort of timeline, she describes the first week of March. It was in the middle of March that the front doors were allowed to be closed by the bus drivers officially. And these 10 seriously ill bus drivers that were mentioned, out of them 6 people ended up dying. So these fears were not irrational either, right? And there were many more people that got sick and stayed at home, but these 10 refers to people that got seriously ill and ended up in hospital. And this shows that, I mean, we wanted to put this in as a way of nuancing that certain groups did have an exaggerated or a high increase in the risk of contracting COVID-19. And it's important to, since our general survey showed that people were not fearing the public transport, but some groups really did fear it, and they feared to go there in their daily lives. Next slide, please. And this one is maybe, is as Tauri started in mentioning, I should stress this again, this is a very initial results, and we're in the middle of analyzing them, but we found these word clouds, and they're all in Swedish, so I'm sorry for that part, everyone. But we did translate them into English, and some of the points actually disappeared, so that's why we show them in Swedish now. So we found that there was a gender difference in description of how people perceive the atmosphere in the public transport when comparing Swedish women and Swedish men. And it was not the result that we had expected, really. So men stressed more effective aspects of the atmosphere. So we have words like atmosphere, calm, little, calmer, subdued are the larger words. And for Swedish men, that is. And for Swedish women, words like distance, people, keep, more are the most common ones. So we are still, as I mentioned, we're still in the middle of analyzing this, but we wanted to end the last slide with a bit of an open question. What does this raise any question with the rest of you? Is it just due to which men that actively took part in our survey, which men we managed to recruit to the survey, and that sort of shifts these results? But we still found that there were a strong difference between them. Quite interesting. So thank you. That was. Do you want to add something, Tauri?
Not much. I mean, I guess I will just note the methodological issue with. I mean, the previous talk was also saying that, you know, was it the Danish part, or you aim to get more of the sort of general overview of the population, and I mean the point here is that this survey is spread via web channels, and of course there are a lot of respondents are the ones who took the initiative to respond. So you have certain bias there as well, which is actually frequently in the service of that time, of the COVID-19 time, because it's quite difficult to go around on public transport to do the studies. So there are certain limits, but yeah, anyway, this is just one point. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So if you close down your presentation, we will invite the next, Mariana. Are you there? Yes.
Yes, hello.
Hi, thank you. Can you share your screen?
Share my presentation. Here, can you see it?
Yes, but you have the same problem as the previous presenters. You need to change mode.
Ah, okay, yes. Like this.
Yes, fine.
So hello, everyone. Thank you. So I am going to quickly present to you some of the work being developed in TInnGO and in our package, and then some of the results we get from a survey spread with the objective of gathering the impact of COVID-19 in mobility patterns and employment through Europe. So in TInnGO, one of the purposes of our work is to identify main aspects in mobility and employment using different groups of users. And we developed some of the work to try to assess the impacts of stereotypes in transport opportunities, in mobility patterns and employment opportunities. And we try to see how the characteristics of these users affect the way that they move and the opportunities that they can reach, and how these characteristics affect their mobility patterns, and how the transport systems could respond to their needs. So as have been said already in some presentations, we heard that to build a more effective and fair mobility plan, we should start by gathering all the needs of all users of the transport system, and heard all of them and try to include all of their needs in these mobility plans. Also, to increase women's participation in the transport sector, we realized that we need to break barriers as stereotypes that are deep-rooted in society, and we believe that this should start in education and educating young minds to think different that we were taught to think. Also, to increase the confidence of these vulnerable groups in the transport system. For example, regarding security, we believe that we need to increase the number of campaigns regarding gender violence and the number of advertisements of the security systems available for people in their transport system. With this work, along with the other activities conducted by hubs across Europe and some outputs from 2 European projects, MedPACS and Diamond, we use this to build our survey, to design our survey that has the objective to using an intersectional approach, assess the mobility patterns across Europe and the employment opportunities that these people have. With COVID-19 pandemic, a new objective appeared, and the question we wanted to ask was: this situation increased inequality between gender, ages, and groups in society, and how mobility habits and employment conditions were affected by this situation. So this survey was spread only online, between July and September in different countries of Europe. And these are some of the questions that were included in the survey, and that we found interesting to highlight. We asked people about their mobility habits before and after the COVID crisis, about their professional situation, if they changed their professional situation or not, and which of the transport modes they started using more with COVID-19. So all partners were able to gather 280 responses, evenly distributed between men and women. The respondents were between 25 and 54 years old, and mainly living in urban areas. So 84% of them were white and 9% have a mixed ethnicity. We couldn't reach many levels of education, as 84% of our respondents at a high level of education. This map here, you can see how many countries we reach with this survey and the respondents of each one. So when asked about the change, about the situation before the COVID-19 crisis, 37% of the respondents said that the professional situation changed. And from these 37%, 71% started working remotely, as we already know. Just a curiosity that probably is familiar to many of you. From these 71% of people, 35% were juggling as they started sharing their office with the children and their families at home. So here, if you look closer to women and men, besides the obvious high percentage in remote work, we can see that 5% of women started to work as their own boss, and 2% of the women that responded to our survey got unemployed, and not for health reasons, unfortunately. So here we change to mobility patterns, and in these two graphics you can see a comparison between the modes used before the COVID-19 crisis and after. We can see clear a decrease in the use of public transport from 29% to 12%. Also a slightly increase in walking modes from 11 to 13%, and a slightly decrease from in the private car use from 42 to 40%. And these 14% here in red are the amount of people that stop going to their place of work or school. So here the comparison between men and women, from our respondents before COVID, we found out that women from this group preferred public transport more than men, and also the private car slightly at a slightly higher percentage than men. As men uses more bike than women, and bike and walk modes. Here, after the COVID-19 crisis, 38% of women started to using private car, and more men started using private car also. It is interesting to see that 14%, only 14% of women were using public transport against the 31% pre-COVID situation. And 18% of these women stopped going to their places of work against 16% of men.
Mm.
So it was interesting to see also that the reasons why people stopped using their normal modes of choice. The reason was the low risk of contagions, so they choose a more safety mode of transport in terms of health terms, and also to see that people started walking more. 38% of our respondents said that they started walking more, using more bicycles, their own bicycles, and of course using more the private car. We believe that for safety reasons. Here we have a comparison between men and women. At first we can't see many difference between men and women in the changes in mobility patterns with the COVID-19 crisis. 11% of the women reported less reliability in PT, in public transport services, as well as men. 12% of men reported also less reliability in public transport services. 5% of the women noted an improvement in conditions of previous modes used previously. This could be the increase of bike lanes or the decrease in traffic, so more proper streets to walk. And also interesting thing is the percentage of people that change for a more sustainable way of traveling. So these were the most important insights that we wanted to show you from this survey. Now we hope to get together some more information with a new survey that we're going to launch in the next few days. With this survey, we hope to characterize the mobility patterns across Europe in all the 10 hub cities that are participating in the TInnGO Hub, and find out mainly the weaknesses in the transport system, and provide some measures that can cope these weaknesses, and hopefully have heard everyone's voice and make some conclusions about their mobility patterns and habits. So we invite you to follow the TInnGO page, and when this survey become available, to participate and tell us more about your city. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. thank you very much, everybody, in this session for your presentations. Very interesting. I have some questions from the chat. I want to report first. It was to Jonas, I think, from Florida, about biking. I will see when I can find it again. Yes, here. Yes, Jonas, here in Spain, we are assisting to a huge increase of bike using by women because of less cars are on the streets. Did you have the same observation in Sweden?
Hello, can you hear me?
Are you there, Jonas?
Yes. But I
cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Just very softly, Jonas, but not so strong.
Not so strong, no.
Okay.
Much better
now. Much better, yes.
Okay. So the question was, no, we can actually not see that there is any difference in terms of gender here, that women bike more than men during the pandemic. It's we have a group that has actually started to bike more, and we have a group that have biked less during the pandemic. But there is no gender difference between these groups in the Swedish context.
We also have a question about what you said about men doing more errands during the pandemic. And
yeah, I actually said that women report doing less errands during the pandemic compared to before. So this decrease was significant. So for women, they run significantly less errands during the pandemic, whereas this was not significant for men. So women run less errands during the pandemic.
But we have other people here saying that in other places in Europe, men were doing, but are still doing more errands than women, because this is the only way to come out. This is the only thing which is allowed to do outside the house, and then men took the opportunity to go to the grocery and go and transport waste and like things like that more than they do usually.
Yeah. So we cannot observe that trend in the Swedish context. It's very interesting though to hear.
But we haven't had that totally lockdown in Sweden. So we are still allowed to take a walk and run in the woods and take a bike tour with no certain errand. So, but I think it's interesting because this is what women usually do when they are on their way to work. They go to the grocery or they take children to care, and they lots of errands on the way. So perhaps this can be a eye opener for men also, how much work this is, and how much it is included in everyday mobility. So yes, Marcus?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I mean, as Tauri said in the early parts, we did more of a qualitative than quantitative study, but we did find the same things as Michala and Jonas talked about, that there was no particular gender difference in the shifts of mode of transport, how more or how less people used different modes of transports. The only thing that was a bit of a difference between gender was that 29% of women have an unchanged use of the metro, and 21% of the men. So more had an unchanged travel pattern. So more men stopped using the metro than women. So
Okay.
But looking at bikes, buses, etc., there was no difference.
So that's interesting to hear.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think also it's very interesting with your interviews when you complete the surveys with interviews and dig deeper into these questions, because I think it's the only way to find more deeper knowledge about why and how, and yeah, and emotions, as you mentioned, also about how they felt about their strategies.
Yeah, I think it shouldn't be understated, like how the more subjective experience will project the future a bit, and how people will act in the future as well. Yes.
We also have a question here from Christina to Mariana. And there are also lots of chats here, so I can't find every question. Can you perhaps repeat it, Mariana?
I can see it. Have you intersect the mobility data with legal restriction of mobility, which was from one country to another? And no, this was a thing that could be really interesting, because in Europe we had different situations. But yes, we don't have the time to do this. Yeah, but it's an interesting approach. Thank you, Christina.
Yes, and you are also extending this study now with more questions and to more respondents. So then we can look more into this issue, I think.
Yes, of course. Our focus now in this main survey will not be the difference between before the situation of COVID and after, but of course.
So are there any other questions which I have missed here? Oh, I think we have 5 minutes left. And my question is, to all of you, are there any exceptions from what you have expected when you did your studies? You may answer, all of you, if you have some reflections on that. Who will start?
I can start. I don't know, maybe our sample was really directed to the people in the network of each partner in TInnGO. So I think that our sample is from, as I showed to you, is from a more high-level educated crowd, and from that we couldn't see many differences between the genders, and many differences between the ages, and I believe that this was because we have a more even sample. High-level educated people that live in an urban area and are really close in age group. So we didn't find the difference that we were expected to find. I think that this is a finding too. The closest.
Michala, or?
Yes,
do you think?
What we, I think we did already mention it, that we were quite surprised that we did not find any gender differences. Also, we were looking into, we didn't show you this slide, but we were looking into ethnicity, and we didn't find any reported differences in transport modes between persons with parents not born in Denmark and ethnic Danes. There was a and indicative, the persons with at least one parent not born in Denmark were more likely to prefer local public transport in the future. But we were expecting to find greater differences. And I think it might be that our survey has over-representation of certain people, well-educated people. And it's also the question of if we didn't do any intersectional crossing yet. So the question is also what we find if we do that, but still I will think that our survey is too small to do that.
Yes, perhaps. Yes.
Yes. So so I could only agree with Michala. I would have expected to see more differences in gender, and we couldn't really do that. And we actually had a quite large sample, which was representative for the Swedish population, and more or less 50-50 between men and women answering. So a bit surprised there, and also that in terms of preferred transport in the future, for instance, in terms of using the car, we couldn't see that women wanted to travel in car less than men would in the future. So also a bit surprised there, actually.
Thank you. Interesting. Tauri and Markus, what do you think?
I mean, I can add some comments here that from the qualitative side, I think the most striking was that we were expecting a bit more about here and the kind of very strong notions of that in the interviews as well as in the survey. But quite interestingly, it was, I mean, of course it was there, and we cannot discount that there was a lot of descriptions as well of how people are also afraid of some of the using public transport or touching the surfaces in public transport or being worried about other people's sneeze or cough. You know, these things are there, but then again, there are a lot of different accounts of how people, you know, were more relaxed even in the emptier buses and felt comfortable, and you know, these narratives were quite interesting. And of course there is a temporal change of that as well. We did interviews in May and June, which was in different countries, different period as well, but when people are coming back to public transport, there's actually, like, there was a moment when public transport became empty, but then also people started to come back, and then this kind of moment academics as well as people again coming back in the public transport. So I think that caused again some concerns, but then again, still I found it very, very interesting. And we were just thinking how much, I mean, this difference is between, like, as Markus also noted, that not so important differences in terms of gender or income, for instance, but the aspect of whether you use it or not, or whether you're a frequent public transport user or not. And I think, you know, there might be some changes or effects there on this kind of fear. Who's the one who is afraid of public transport? Is it the regular user? Is it the one who actually can use something else or move other modes? Are they actually the one who are afraid?
But you also have this interesting view from the bus drivers, I think, because they are really exposed to this, and then it's more like there are certain professions, certain frontline workers who are more exposed than others, and they can't choose to work from home.
Sure, exactly. I mean, of course, with the ones using public transport, as everybody has said, you know, there's a certain bias in this kind of studies towards more highly educated ones as well.
Yes,
so
it is. Yes, I think
there could be some different understandings as well, including a wider social group in the study.
And I think this is one thing we have learned from this situation. It's has been very visible that people with low income and low education are the ones who are less advantaged in transport, and it's very visible in a crisis.
Mm.
So I think we have to stop here. There are a few questions in the chat, so you can look at them and go on, chat with each other. Thank you very much for these interesting presentations, and I'm looking forward to hear more about your studies when you have finished them, because all of this is in work in progress. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lena. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Right, thank you.